because we're starting. Unless you're a kid and your connection time is in the Sunday school room. Attempt to get people's attention. All right, we're gonna assume it sort of works. Okay, good morning. How is everybody today? So, I wish I had not called this Secrets of the Hymnnal in retrospect. I think I should have called it Secrets of Hymns, because it's not so much about this specific hymnal. Some of you attended a Zoom back in January where Mark Mummert from Trinity Worcester talked a lot about how this specific hymnal was put together. But I'm here more to talk about hymns in general, what they are, and lots of information that you can find on the page that I guarantee you not all of you are aware is really there. And of course, we're going to make this interactive. So, who wants to give me a definition of the word hymn? Anybody? Oh, come on, this is sad. What do you think a hymn is? Yes?
Religious song.
Okay, religious song. Anybody got anything else?
Song in a hymnal.
A song in a hymnal. Oh, that's a nice try. Third time's the charm. Anybody else? Does it have to do with a heavenly choir? Not really. So I'm going to say all those answers are wrong. I'm going to try them. Actually, you're all kind of along the colloquial meaning. So some of you know St. Augustine referred to a hymn as a song with praise of God, and he had this big long quote talking about how all three elements had to be there, that if it were a song but without praise it was not a hymn, etc., etc. But technically speaking, the word hymn isn't about a song at all. It only refers to the text. So the melody that we sing is called a hymn tune, and we will talk about those today too. But the hymn itself, strictly speaking, is just a poem. It's not the tune. So the hymn writer is someone who writes the text. And sometimes that person also writes music to sing that text to. So Martin Luther did that with A Mighty Fortress. But more often the tune comes from a different person. The word hymn comes from ancient Greek. I won't bore you with all that. But the first hymns in this modern sense of the word hymn were Lutheran. So prior to the Reformation, all the singing in church was done by the clergy, and it was usually just all chant. So one of the many things that Luther revolutionized was including songs for the whole congregation to sing as part of the worship service. And arguably for 100 years, until Isaac Watts came along, the Lutherans were basically the only stream of the Reformation that sang hymns in worship. And before anybody tries to contradict me about that, I know the Calvinists sang metrical psalms, but not any hymns with original texts. The Calvinists did not allow hymns with texts from the New Testament even, or from elsewhere in the Old Testament. It could only be psalms. Yes?
In the Greek meaning, did it mean that it was something that was collective versus something that was individual? Because I always thought that was kind of right. What did it mean for it to be a hymn? It was everybody was doing it together.
So that's a great question. I'm not aware of that being part of the meaning, although it could be. I think it was really just a song of praise, I think originally to the gods. I mean, I have a friend who works at a UU church, and as you might know, Unitarians don't necessarily believe in God. My friend is quite militantly atheist, but that doesn't mess with her UU belief, because really it's more of a humanist religion. And the UU say that they sing hymns. They're certainly not in praise to God, so maybe it's just in praise of something. So the definition is clearly a little bit amorphous.
So everybody was right as well as wrong.
I suppose that's true. You were all right. So when the early Lutherans created the first hymnals, they didn't necessarily always include written out music in the hymnals. They included the texts, and the earliest texts were sung to popular folk songs. So a great example, I think, of our most solemn Passiontide hymn, O Sacred Head. The tune we sing it to, it started off around 1600. It was written as a secular love song, Mein Gemüt ist mir verwirrend. And the English The English text is basically, my mood has been confused by a maiden tender, I'm completely lost and my heart is in pain. So next time Holy Week comes along, if you're singing, oh sacred head, and you're thinking about that love-filled text, if that feels sacrilegious to you, remember the quote, it's probably apocryphal, but we claim that Luther said, why should the devil have all the good tunes? So we'll come back to the topic of tunes very soon. But now I have another interactive question for you. So I'd like to hear answers about what makes a particular text count as a hymn, and if you think of the Venn diagram of sacred texts and hymns, are all sacred texts hymns or no? So have at it. What do you think?
No.
Okay, so not all sacred texts are hymns. I agree with you about that. So what do you think makes a text count as a hymn?
Has a meter.
Yes, brava! There's a little bit more, but we'll just go with that. So hymn texts have to follow a particular structure. First characteristic, if I use a fancy word that musicians and poets use, hymns are strophic. That means that they have multiple verses that are all structured the same way. You might have a verse and then a refrain and then a verse and then a refrain, but it's never going to get more complicated than that. You won't have verse, refrain, bridge, verse, coda. That's some of the band music does that, and there's nothing wrong with it, but that's not how hymns are structured. Number two, kind of along the same line of thought, hymns have to follow a fairly consistent meter. So the rhythm, the number of syllables per line can't change very much between the verses. And the third thing is that hymns should use a fairly consistent rhyme scheme. Now, like all poetry, they don't have to rhyme. But if they do rhyme, the way the rhymes work should work the same way from verse to verse. And so my great example of that, I think back to when I was 9 years old, worshiping in my family's Catholic church. Unlike many other denominations, Catholics don't have a denomination-wide hymnal. They don't have something like ELW. They've got a bunch of dueling publishing houses, and every church has got its different hymnal. But one of the publishing houses, World Library Publications, came out with a new version of the We Celebrate hymnal in 1990. And they had made this wonderful good faith effort to, before I tell you what they tried to do, I'll tell you the hymn I'm thinking of. So even when I was 9, one of my favorite hymns was, the King of Love, my shepherd is, and then fast forward a little, I want for nothing, I am his, because is and his rhyme, duh. So World Library Publications tried so hard to edit the hymns to be gender inclusive. And this is a really laudable goal. We know that we are all made in God's image, not just the men in the room. But when you get to a pre-existing text, you have to be kind of careful how you do it. And their editors were clearly not really on the ball. Because suddenly in 1990, my church started singing, the King of Love, my shepherd is, blah, 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 blah. I want for nothing, I am God's. And it doesn't rhyme, and it made me crazy even then. So back to meter, back to the idea of having an equal number of, or a consistent number of syllables per line. So one reason that this is important is, I guess another key characteristic of a hymn is that the texts are somewhat interchangeable, somewhat. So to illustrate this, we're all going to sing a little bit. You all have hymnals. If you're someone who finds the hymnal difficult to maneuver, I also do have handouts. Louise, do you want one of these?
No, I can't.
You're good? Okay. The downside of the handouts is that they're a little more faded. The upside is they're larger print. So raise your hand if you want one of these. Okay, you're good with the hymnal. Turn to 836. 836. I guarantee you all know this one. If you don't know this, just give up now and leave. Um, so I'm going to give you a little introduction, and we're all going to sing the first verse together. And Roberta, feel free to grab more chairs. I clearly didn't set up enough.
I see you left two in the front for me.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can also grab more and put them in back.
That's okay, I'm sorry. I was having a fight with the Keurig machine.
It's all good. All right, so here's your little intro. You're all gonna help me out here. What a good player you are. Why are you not all up there on Sunday mornings?
I know this is a sneaky way for choir.
Oh, totally. Okay, but keep your page open now. So look in the bottom right corner of the page, underneath the hymn. The print is not super large, but the first thing you'll see the words Hymn to Joy in all capital letters. And we'll come back to that. But more importantly right now, underneath it, it says 8787D. That's telling us the meter that this hymn is in. So it starts with 8. The first line has 8 syllables. Joyful, joyful, we adore thee. The next line has 7 syllables. God of glory, Lord of love. And then another 8, then another 7. The D means that this pattern is doubled. So 8787D is a short way of saying 87878787. There are a lot of other 8787D hymns in this hymnal, and I mean really a lot. So, as an example, you stay turned to the same page. You are still on 836. I'm going to turn to a different page. You're going to sing those same old joyful, joyful words, but to a different tune. And spoiler alert, so this one you will recognize, you usually sing it with the text, Come thou fount of every blessing. So you can handle this one. I'm going to struggle a little reading notes off one page and words off another, so again, sing heartily so that you don't hear me mess up. Here we go. Did that tune still express the same sense of joy we were looking for? Did it work? I would say it works. This begs the question of, so can we just match any text and tune that are 8787D? So we're going to find out. You're going to get so tired of Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. We're going to sing it one last time. This time I'm not telling you the tune I'm going to. It's on the other half of the hymnal. And as possibly a spoiler alert for some of the choir members, this was Pastor John's favorite hymn tune. And I had almost 12 years ago now that I auditioned at Faith, so November 2010, I had to play this as part of my audition. But I did not have to play it and sing a different text, so once again, forgive me.
Abby?
Yes?
Are 8787s done in a minor chord tune?
Let's find out. No,
Not joyful.
I would say that tune does not convey the same sense of joy that the other two did.
I thought
So,
he did. I know he did.
oh no, he loved this one.
Oh, okay.
So, excuse me. So, editors of hymnals or musicians who are creating tunes to go with texts have to be really smart about what is the affect of the text. What is the text trying to convey, and can we create music that matches it? And not to beat a dead horse, but I'm going to give you one more example because this is just kind of fun. We're tired of Joyful, Joyful. So now turn to the hymn we just sang. So it's 327 is the tune that we just sang. Through the night of doubt and sorrow. See, that's a text that works with that tune.
What was that? I'm sorry, the number again?
327.
Of course, Pastor Jubilate.
Oh, he likes that one. It's okay. But now I'm going to play a different tune with this, and I'm not going to tell you what tune is coming. So you're going to sing the text through the night of doubt and sorrow. And here's one last 8787D hymn tune.
27.
Example, right? So you've gotten the point. So this is, we've sung several tunes now, but this is only a fraction of the 8787D tunes in this hymnal, not to mention all the other meters. So, true story, about 10 years ago maybe, I had a party with some very nerdy music friends, and we sang through the entire hymnal to, like, Joyful, Joyful to every possible tune that it could be fit with. Very, very lame party game. If you wanted to do that, not necessarily at a party, but if you wanted to know all the possible tunes that you could try for Through the Night of Doubt and Sorrow, how would you figure that out? Where would you look? So if you wanted to figure out every single tune that you could try to match to Through the Night of Doubt and Sorrow, where would you look?
1201.
Yes? What?
1201.
Let's see if that's true. Almost. 1199. So there are a lot. Oh, you're right. 1201. Yep, you win.
Oh, yeah,
You're good.
Oh, all these little numbers.
So there are a lot. There are a lot of indices in the back of the hymnal, and I would say they maybe go in reverse order of importance. So the very back index on page 1205 is the index of first lines and titles of hymns, and I think that's the one most of you use the most often. Almost immediately before that, it starts on 1199. We should look at 1199. It's the metrical index. And so this index lists, well, if you start halfway through the second column, it lists the meters by numbers, starting with the lower number of syllables, going to higher numbers. Before that, it lists some meters that are so common that they have nicknames. So, common meter, which is what we use for Amazing Grace, by the way, 8686 happens a lot. You can see there's a kind of a sizable list under CM. So, the hymnal here tells us what common meter is. It tells us the number of syllables. But if you were singing Amazing Grace and you went to look in that lower right-hand corner, it wouldn't bother writing out the numbers. It would just say CM, and that tells us it's common meter.
What is it? What are the words below the names, like Detroit?
We're coming to that. That's okay. So hold that thought. The other thing, so this is a long index. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. So we have, on the first page of it, we have meters with names like short meter double, common meter. There's 2 categories also on page 1203 that have kind of great names. My favorite name for a meter is peculiar meter. So peculiar meter means that, hang on, I'm turning my page so I don't lose track of what I have to say. It's a list of hymns that have unique metrical structures that really don't match anything else in our hymnal, or perhaps in most other denominational hymnals too. So it's still something that counts as a hymn because it's still structured in a very orderly way, but it's just different number of syllables than is typical. And so rather than list every one of these hymns with its own heading, they've just lumped them all together as peculiar meter. Anything under peculiar meter is going to be unique. So we're going to sing one peculiar meter hymn that we sang last Ash Wednesday. So turn to 801 in your hymnal. Andrew, you know this one well.
I do. I was just thinking, I missed the beginning of it, but I like that it counts syllables, not actual time signature, because that didn't really exist,
Right,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, okay.
I think that when we get our hymns for next week, we'll just look up in the back and we'll use our own words.
That would be
See
exciting.
how you like
Okay,
that.
so you guys are going to help me sing this one too. Oh, and you're going to count to yourselves maybe while you sing. So we know this is peculiar meter. When we finish it, see if you can tell me what the numbers for this meter would be. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. You are the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me. This is what I praise and astound. Change my heart, oh God, make it ever true. Change my heart, oh God, may I be like you. Now this one's a little tricky because it, I think it does still count as a hymn structure. It's not like verse, refrain, bridge, coda, not too much crazy stuff going on. But it is not quite as typical a structure as you usually see. So I think we might have like a few possible answers that I would consider right. Who thinks they know the answer? Yes.
Well, the first two lines, I would go 4, 4, 4, 4.
I wouldn't. Does anyone else have a different answer for those first lines? Yes.
I'm playing 5, 5, 5, 5, D.
Not quite. But yeah, it starts out 5, 5, 5, 5. Change my heart, oh God. Which one of those syllables did you skip, Roberta?
Oh, you know, I was going by beats. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a different story. So it starts out 5, 5, 5, 5. And then what would you say for that second half that's kind of the verse?
3,
5,
4.
5, 4, 5, 5.
Yes. And here's where we could disagree. I think it could be 5, 4, 5, 5. I kind of think it could be 5, 4, 5, 4 because this is like, yes, in this hymn, these words, for sure it's 5, but you can imagine writing a new verse that went, hold me and make me, here's what I pray, or something, and it still fits. So it could be 5, 4, 5, 4, could be 5, 4, 5, 5. You've got the idea. So there's no other hymn in our hymnal with that exact structure, so that goes under our peculiar meter list. Well, that begs the question. We also have a category called irregular meter. And, you know, based on the titles, one thinks, well, what's irregular and how is it different than peculiar? So in peculiar meter, remember that all of our verses still have the same, well, this was kind of a one-verse hymn, so it was a bad example. But if it were a long hymn, all the verses would still have the same structure. Could be a peculiar structure, would still be the same. In irregular meter, these are hymns or songs that break the rule. And not all verses of the song have exactly the same meter. Sometimes there are only small changes between verses. In that case, I'd still call it a hymn. So the very first tune you see listed under irregular meter is Adeste Fideles, which is the tune that you all know as O Come All Ye Faithful. And we sing this often enough. You probably already have internalized. So the first verse starts with an upbeat. So if I was going to kind of count you in, I'd go 1, 2, 3. Oh, come. Yeah. Verse 4, the third and fourth verses start on the downbeat. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yea, Lord. So it's a really small difference, but it's an important enough difference that this hymn counts as irregular. In some cases, there are bigger discrepancies between verses. So turn to 780. Shepherd me, O God. We're not going to sing this one because I know you guys don't really know it. But if you look at it, you'll see that the verses are so different from each other that we've got verses 1 through 3 written in one place, and then verse 4 written in a different place, and then verse 5 written in a different place because they couldn't be all stacked up because they're just wildly dissimilar.
Oh my gosh.
So this song, this is not technically a hymn, even though it's in our hymnal, because it does not have consistent meter, it does not have consistent rhyme scheme. This song comes from the Roman Catholic, some people call it the contemporary folk tradition. And remember, I grew up Catholic, I've served in many Catholic churches, and I can tell you that in some Catholic hymnals, portions of the hymnals may have different headers. You might have a portion that's headed like hymns and songs for Advent, because the hymnal's telling you the truth. They're not all hymns, they're all sacred songs for Advent. Our hymnal didn't quite tell us the truth. I think it only uses the word hymn, but there are things in this hymnal that are not hymns. So back to that idea of the structure is what makes something a hymn. Some of the things that the band does at the contemporary service are absolutely hymns. I think, in Christ alone my hope is found. Every verse of that follows the exact same meter. Some of the things you do, where there's a verse and a pre-chorus and a chorus and a bridge and a pre-coda and a coda, those are not hymns. It has nothing to do with when it was written. It has nothing to do with whether the text in the hymn is archaic. It is really about the meter. So in our hymnal, we have many different texts and we have many different tunes. Which do you think we have more of, texts or tunes? Absolutely texts. So this brings us to another bit of information that you can find on the page of any hymn. We've already covered the meter information. Turn to 556, which is a hymn many of you know and love. 556. So in a moment we're going to sing, actually let's just sing it now, just the first verse. You know this. Information, you see the word Banethin. That's the hymn tune name. That's what Louise was starting to ask about earlier. So all tunes that we use for hymns have tune names. And the person who creates the tune name might be the musician who wrote the tune, or it might be the editor who put together the hymnal. I'm going to try to be speedy because I know we only have 7 minutes left. So turn to page 1195 in the back, because that's where you get another useful index, your index of tunes. So we know that this tune is called Benessen. If you go down under the B's, you see that there's 4 different numbers for hymns that we sing to the same tune. So turn to 456, 456. That's back in my other half of the hymnal. We'll sing the first verse of this one. The tune is exactly the same. The text is different. If I can get to it. because more information on the page. If you look at the bottom left-hand corner, you see information on who wrote the text and information on who wrote the music. And we don't know who wrote this music. It's a traditional Gaelic tune. But musicologists believe that this traditional melody might have originated in the village of Benesson, which is a village on an island off the western coast of Ireland. So it's named after where the tune maybe came from. That's a really good reason for a tune name. Many tune names are geographical. In fact, right before what we just sang, 455 is Stuttgart, so that's another geographical tune name.
I can attest to that.
Other tunes are named after the first line of the text that first made that tune famous. So we often see this in texts that originated in another language. So you remember I talked a moment ago about Adeste Fideles, because originally it was a Latin poem. Adeste Fideles, leti triumphantes, venite, venite in Bethlehem. Last thought of the day. There's more next week. So another example like that would be A Mighty Fortress. So people sing it in all sorts of language the world over, but the musicians all know that tune as Ein Festeberg. I have a lot more to say about tune names. Some of them have really interesting stories behind them. You know, there's one tune not in this hymnal that is named Complainer. And it's actually not a good story, but I always imagine what might have prompted a name like that. I also am going to tell you next week more about how we use those names, how the tune names actually differ sometimes between denominations and why and what we might do about that someday. We'll talk about isometric versus rhythmic hymns. Doesn't that sound exciting? And different musical styles and traditions that are represented in our hymnal. But obviously the contemporary service has to start. So that's it for today. To be continued next week.
What do you want us to do?
If you can bring them back to the choir room, when you enter the room, there's a closet on your left, and you can just stick them in there.